The camera blinked twice before going dark. At first, I thought it was a system glitch, until I checked the feed and saw Karen, in full garden hat and rubber gloves, yanking it off the mount like she was harvesting fruit from my backyard. She looked straight into the lens before unplugging it and whispered, "I warned you." What she didn't know, what no one ever told her, was that my cameras are not just cameras. They're part of a federal-grade monitoring system I helped build. And when you mess with them, they don't just stop recording. They start reporting to the FBI. 2 weeks earlier, I had moved into what I thought was going to be a peaceful, quiet neighborhood just outside the city limit. I'd worked my tail off for this place. After years of dealing with corporate cybersecurity chaos, I had taken a break from the madness, gone freelance, and decided to finally enjoy the fruits of my labor. My new house was everything I'd wanted. Secluded enough for privacy, modern enough for comfort, and wired tighter than Fort Knox with smart tech I personally designed. Every inch of my property had been thoughtfully secured. Motion sensors, smart locks, high-res night vision cameras, and even an AI-based detection system that could distinguish between a dog, a person, or a raccoon with a vendetta. I wasn't paranoid, I was just prepared. Besides, designing systems like these used to be my job. If anything, this place was my retirement project, except I hadn't accounted for the local boss level, Karen. I met her 3 days after moving in. I was setting up my solar panels when she marched across the street and onto my driveway without even a hello. "Those cameras," she barked, pointing like she was identifying illegal weaponry, "are an invasion of community comfort." I looked up from the control box, still holding a wrench. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "Karen Bell," she announced like she was dropping royalty. "President of the HOA. You should have come to me for clearance before putting those up." I blinked at her. "I'm not in the HOA." She paused. That wasn't the answer she expected. "Well, even so, they're making people feel watched. No one's even driven past my house except for the Amazon guy and now you." She folded her arms like she was trying to contain her rising temper. "You'll want to consider adjusting them. For the sake of neighborhood harmony." With that, she turned and stomped back across the street, leaving behind the sweet smell of overconfidence and sunscreen. I dismissed it. I figured she was just one of those neighborhood busybodies trying to puff up her chest. I was wrong. She wasn't just a busybody. She was the final boss of suburban chaos. The first camera went down 3 days later. I got the alert while sipping coffee and reviewing code. Camera 03, driveway perimeter, offline. I figured maybe a squirrel chewed something. But when I pulled up the backup feed from the cloud, my jaw tightened. There she was. Karen, in plain sight, on my driveway, walking up to the camera with her face tilted away like some amateur spy. She reached up with a towel and unplugged the power supply. Then, for some reason, she saluted it before walking off. Okay. Deep breath. I reconnected the camera, changed the wiring route, and added a battery failover. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had gotten it out of her system. Then it happened again. And again. One night, 3 different cameras went offline within 5 minutes of each other. Each time I restored the feed, there she was. Different outfits, different times of day, always avoiding the lens, always with some new prop to avoid fingerprint. That's when I stopped trying to reason with her, and started logging everything. What Karen didn't know was that these cameras weren't just for show. When tampered with, they triggered something called Tier 2 protocol. It was a part of a federal surveillance suite I had helped design for high-risk government infrastructure. It wasn't active by default. But after the 3rd time she came onto my property to sabotage my setup, I enabled it manually. Here's what that means. Every time she touched a camera, a silent alert was sent to a secure server, which logged the device's real-time status, GPS timestamp, facial recognition match, and voice pattern analysis. And once those events hit a certain threshold, 10 unique violations within a 30-day window, the system auto-generated a tampering report and submitted it to the regional FBI monitoring queue. I'd only heard of it being used once, when a contractor messed with a Department of Energy facility. I never imagined I'd use it for a suburban showdown. But Karen made sure of that. By the time she hit camera number 9, I'd already installed tamper-resistant mount. By number 10, I had installed a voice warning system. And by number 11, she'd tripped the full chain of federal response. I remember the 11th time clearly. I was watching from inside with a bowl of popcorn. She'd brought a ladder this time. Climbed halfway up my fence. She actually waved at one of the cameras before grabbing it. That's when the speaker came alive. Tampering detected. This incident is being reported under United States Code Title 18. Please step away. She froze like she'd seen a ghost. Looked around like maybe someone was pranking her. Then she dropped the camera and bolted, her ladder crashing to the ground behind her. I didn't even have to get up from my seat. I just let the system do its thing. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Automated FBI report submitted. Incident ID. Hashtag 1148Q Sigma. I set my popcorn down and smiled. This wasn't about just security anymore. This was now about accountability. Karen thought she could get away with it because she had always gotten away with it. But what she didn't know was that I don't play games. I build them, and the rules were about to change. The next morning, she was back. But this time she came knocking like nothing had ever happened. I opened the door, expecting confrontation. Instead, Karen stood there holding a tray of cookies with the fakest smile plastered across her face. Her voice was sing-song sweet, like she hadn't just attempted to sabotage my surveillance system for the 4th time that week. Thought I'd welcome you properly, she chirped, eyes darting past me to scan the inside of my house. I didn't touch the cookies. She leaned in just enough to make it awkward. Look, I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Neighborhoods like ours, they thrive on trust. On privacy. You understand, don't you? I stared at her, wondering if she had completely forgotten that my cameras recorded her every move, or if she genuinely believed a half-dozen chocolate chip cookies would overwrite literal video evidence. Karen, I said calmly, I have you on tape. 5 times. Trespassing, unplugging my cameras, and messing with private property. Her smile didn't even flinch. That was a misunderstanding. I thought they were malfunctioning. Sparking even. I was trying to help. They didn't spark. Well, they looked like they might. I nodded slowly, more curious now than angry. Did it also look like a good idea to climb over my fence with a pool skimmer and duct tape? She waved it off. Let's not dwell on the past. I'm extending an olive branch. No, you're extending a legal liability wrapped in aluminum foil. Her tone dropped a notch. You're not going to make this difficult, are you? I stepped back and closed the door halfway, leaving her and her mystery cookies out in the sun. I think you should leave my property before this turns into something more than difficult. She stood there a moment, expression souring, then spun on her heel and walked off, muttering about antisocial tech freaks and how she knew people. I didn't even bother replying. I just watched her through the camera she hadn't found yet. Later that afternoon, I noticed new tracks in my flower bed, thin, parallel lines. Curious, I reviewed the footage. The camera she hadn't tampered with had a perfect angle. Karen with a ladder, boots muddy, wobbling slightly as she reached for the side-mounted lens above my garage. She was wearing gloves this time, probably to avoid fingerprints, and she was whispering something to herself like a villain giving a monologue. She unhooked the power and laughed to no one. Then, she casually climbed back down and walked off like she hadn't just committed a federal-level stupidity. This time, I didn't even bother reconnecting the camera. I let the system do its thing. Each tamper event was now generating its own incident packet, time-stamped and cross-referenced with her image from previous recordings. Her ladder, her gloves, even the bottom of her boots, it was all being logged. I wasn't angry. I was impressed. It takes a special kind of persistence to keep breaking the law with the confidence of someone canceling a brunch reservation. The next day I made a few upgrades. I added internal batteries to all external cameras so they'd keep recording even when unplugged. I installed hidden backup lenses tucked into ornamental housings, birdhouses, fake rocks, you name it. And I rerouted the server access to a protected tunnel so even if she found the control hub, she couldn't disable the upload. I also made one last adjustment, a passive wireless geofence that detected known devices within a radius of my home. It was a little trick I picked up while working with a few agencies that shall remain unnamed. Basically, if Karen's phone came within 20 feet of my walls, I'd get an alert. And if she connected to any open networks I hosted, even accidentally, she'd be tagged in the system. That Sunday she returned. Not with cookies this time, but with a clipboard and a sour expression that screamed entitled fury. She knocked twice. I didn't answer. I watched through the peephole as she scribbled something onto a piece of paper and taped it to my door. After she left, I read it. It said, in all caps, "You are in violation of Neighborhood Unity Guidelines. Remove surveillance devices or further action will be taken." I laughed. Neighborhood Unity Guidelines? The most ridiculous combination of words I'd seen in a long time. Especially since I wasn't under any HOA jurisdiction, hadn't signed any agreements, and owned my lot outright. The only guidelines I followed were local laws and federal codes, which she, incidentally, had been violating daily. I didn't respond. I figured her next move would be dumber, and I was right. That night, around 11:30, I got a motion alert. Then another. My cameras lit up one by one, detecting movement along the perimeter. I pulled up the live feed and saw her again, this time with a flashlight, pointing it into the cameras, trying to blind the lenses while fumbling with what looked like a screwdriver. She was wearing all black. I guess she thought if she dressed like a cat burglar, the law wouldn't notice the trespassing. One of the new cameras had been programmed to speak under certain conditions. I enabled the microphone just as she raised the screwdriver to the lens. The voice was clear and cold. Tampering detected. This activity is being logged and reported to federal authorities under USC Title 18. Step away from the property. Karen jumped back like she'd been electrocuted. Her flashlight dropped to the ground and rolled into a bush. She muttered something, maybe a prayer, maybe a curse, and took off running. The camera zoomed in as she sprinted across the lawn, tripping over her own feet and landing face first in a patch of dirt. The audio picked up her groan of frustration as she picked herself up and staggered off into the night. The system logged it all. The time, the device ping from her phone when it got too close, the moment she tripped, and the audio signature of her voice during the whole failed mission. That incident pushed her violation count over the edge. The FBI auto-reporting function went live. A notification appeared on my phone like a badge of honor. Tampering report filed. Incident threshold exceeded. Case forwarded to Federal Monitoring Unit. I sat there on the porch with my coffee, watching the final footage of her escape. She didn't know it yet, but the game was no longer hers to play. She had turned what should have been a neighborly disagreement into a federal case. And soon, someone far more qualified than me was going to knock on her door. By Monday morning, Karen had returned to her default setting, denial mixed with defiance. She strutted down the street like a reality TV villain mid-season, arms folded, sunglasses perched like she was surveying her kingdom. She didn't even look in my direction as I watered my plants and pretended not to notice the bandage on her knee. The one I had footage of her earning when she face-planted into my lawn after trying to sabotage my camera for the 12th time. I could tell she was brewing something. The pause at the end of my driveway, the little glance toward my windows, the tight grip on her phone. Karen wasn't done. She was recalibrating. I'd already reviewed the federal submission logs twice, not because I was worried, but because I wanted to make sure everything was tight. It was. The evidence package was cleaner than a Swiss bank. Every event time-stamped, cross-referenced, and video supported. If someone so much as sneezed in the vicinity of one of my cameras, the system logged the wind pattern. The FBI's automated intake server had already pinged back a case number. That meant it was officially on someone's desk, flagged for follow-up. Still, I wasn't taking any chances. I made a few more upgrades. I wasn't just playing defense anymore. I was going full fortress. I rewired the garage-mounted camera with a shock-absorbing bracket and disguised it inside a motion sensor floodlight. I also replaced the flowerbed camera Karen kept attacking with a decoy. Cheap plastic, zero function, and glaringly obvious. The real camera was hidden behind a faux bird feeder on a telescopic pivot arm. The moment she reached for the decoy, the hidden cam would pan, zoom, and record every nose hair she flared in anger. She took the bait the very next night. I got the alert at 10:14 p.m. Karen had returned, dressed again in her ninja gear, black hoodie, black leggings, bright white sneakers that completely ruined the look. She was crouched near the decoy cam, fiddling with something metallic. I recognized it as a USB jammer, the kind you can find online if you know the dark corners. She thought it would kill the signal. What it actually did was trigger a silent alarm in my system and record her MAC address. She was actively transmitting data interference across a private network, and that kicked the whole thing into a new legal category. This time, I didn't need to say anything. The hidden cam captured every second of it, from her trying to yank the fake camera, to her frustrated huff when it came off too easily, to the moment she realized nothing happened. That's when she looked up and caught the real lens moving, just slightly, zooming in on her face. She blinked, stared, slowly backed up like she'd just seen a ghost. And then, as if on cue, my porch light flicked on. She ran again, tripped again. I didn't even smile this time. I just opened my phone and checked the logs. The system had upgraded the tampering flag from residential to active surveillance obstruction, which basically told the FBI, hey, this one's spicy. The next day, she returned to her passive-aggressive route. Instead of climbing fences, she launched a paper campaign. Flyers. Note. Petitions. She dropped one in every mailbox on the street, including mine. The top said, "Protect our privacy. Say no to paranoid neighbors." Below that was a blurry photo of one of my cameras, taken at a weird angle, and a paragraph of fear-mongering gibberish about how smart homes were a threat to mental health and suburban peace. At the bottom, she'd drawn a little graphic of a camera with a red circle and slash through it, like a middle school anti-drug poster. I tossed mine in the shredder and waited. 2 days later, she made her biggest mistake yet. She approached my server closet. Now, this thing isn't accessible from the outside, but the window nearby vents warm air, and if you're determined and stupid, you might think you can reach in and cut something important. Karen had apparently been doing YouTube research, because when I watched the footage, she was muttering technical jargon like she was on a spy mission. Power bypass, static grounding, don't touch red. Then she touched red. Now, I'm not a monster. I didn't rig my home with anything dangerous, but I had installed a static discharge mat beneath the vent, the kind that gives a small jolt to anything conductive. It's legal, it's safe, and most importantly, it's effective. Karen yelped so loudly the camera's microphone clipped. She dropped whatever tool she was holding and flailed backward into a row of decorative shrubs, which exploded in a flurry of petals and panic. And there it was, the final straw. The system pinged, not once, but 3 times. Incident count surpassed the federal threshold for elevated response. A red banner flashed across my monitoring dashboard. Federal escalation active. The funny part? I didn't even have to lift a finger. My system had already compiled every frame, every audio clip, every network ping. It compressed them into a single encrypted packet and forwarded them to the assigned regional bureau contact. The kind of contact that doesn't knock twice when they come calling. That night, I sat on my porch with a coffee in one hand and my cat in the other, watching the streetlights flicker on. Karen's house was dark. Curtains drawn. No movement. I imagined her in there, fuming over a failed mission, surrounded by printouts of camera angles and half-eaten revenge cookies. She still didn't know she'd gone from neighborhood nuisance to federal subject of interest. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then my phone vibrated again. A new message. Federal agent assigned to incident #1148Q Sigma. Initial contact scheduled. I leaned back in my chair and took a long sip of coffee. She had wanted a war over cameras. She was about to get something far more enlightening. I wasn't the one she needed to worry about anymore. Someone far better trained was coming. The knock on my door the following afternoon wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of weight that made you pause before answering. I'd been waiting for it, half expecting it, and yet it still gave me a jolt of adrenaline when it finally came. Through the peephole, I saw two individuals in plain clothes, polished shoes, tucked-in shirts, no-nonsense posture. They weren't salespeople, and they sure weren't with the neighborhood association. One held a leather wallet just slightly open, flashing a badge in the light without saying a word. I opened the door with a calm nod, stepping aside without them even needing to ask. They introduced themselves as Agent Grayson and Agent Lou from a federal regional office, here to follow up on an incident report involving repeated tampering with a federally registered private surveillance system. Grayson was tall, quiet, with the kind of stare that made you sit up straighter. Lou was sharper, faster, scanning everything with a flick of her eyes like she was decoding the room before her partner even spoke. I didn't waste their time. I handed them a hard drive with the compiled footage, the logs, the timestamps, even the voice recordings. The system had organized it so neatly that it looked like it had been assembled by a prosecution team. They sat at my kitchen table, reviewing the evidence in silence, occasionally exchanging glances, but never looking confused or surprised. This wasn't new to them. What was new, though, was the scale of stupidity in this case. Agent Lou finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. She doesn't know this system reports to the FBI, does she? Nope, I replied, sipping from a mug that said data never lies. She thought she was unplugging nanny cams. Grayson gave a slight smirk. And instead she was unplugging a Class 2 private surveillance node with federal backup logging. Beautiful. I didn't smile, but I did feel the satisfaction settle in. After weeks of watching her dance around the law like it was a suggestion, things were finally catching up. The agents finished their review, packed up the drive, and stood to leave. Before they stepped out, Agent Lou turned back with a raised eyebrow. Mind if we pay her a visit? Be my guest, I said, holding the door open for them. She's 2 doors down. Big hydrangeas. Bigger ego. They didn't laugh, but I knew they wanted to. Watching them walk across the street, calm as you like, was better than television. Karen had no idea what was about to happen, and I wasn't going to miss a second of it. I stepped out onto the porch with a book I wasn't going to read, pretending to lounge casually as the agents knocked on her door. Karen answered in under 5 seconds, which told me she'd been watching them approach. She wore what she probably thought was a casual outfit, tennis skirt, pastel sweater, pearls, but the stiff way she stood screamed nervous energy. From across the street, I couldn't hear the words, but I could read her body language. First confusion, then dismissal, then sharp tension. Her hand went to her chest. Her mouth opened in rapid protest. She pointed across the street at me. Bad move. Agent Grayson didn't flinch. He handed her a printed sheet, probably a summary of the incident report. Karen stared at it like it was written in an alien language. She shook her head, waved her arms, stomped once. Lou leaned forward slightly, speaking in a low, even tone. Karen's defiance evaporated. Her arms dropped. Her posture shrank. Then she nodded once, took the paper, and closed the door without another word. It was over in less than 5 minutes, but the impact would last a lot longer. I didn't hear from Karen for the next 3 days. No flyers. No angry note. No mysterious camera outages. Her house looked like a ghost lived there. Blinds closed. Porch lights off. Even the hydrangeas looked less smug. I figured she was busy Googling federal laws and trying to spin a story for her friends about how it was all a misunderstanding. What she didn't know was that misunderstandings don't usually come with case numbers. But just when I thought she might have learned something, anything, she reappeared. And in true Karen fashion, she couldn't help but double down. It was Saturday morning. I stepped outside to check the mail and noticed something taped to my garage. A manila envelope. I pulled it down and opened it, curious but not surprised. Inside was a single typed letter, signed by Karen Bell, acting president of the Neighborhood Privacy Committee. The letter claimed that my home surveillance setup had caused her emotional distress, sleep loss, and ongoing anxiety due to invasive recording practices. She claimed I had weaponized technology against the community and demanded immediate cessation of all recording or she would seek civil and legal remedies. I laughed so hard I dropped the envelope in the driveway. Karen was trying to threaten me with legal action, after the FBI had already visited her for tampering with federal grade systems. She didn't just misunderstand the law. She thought she was the law. I scanned the letter, documented it, and attached it to the ongoing case file. Then, just for good measure, I submitted it through the FBI's supplemental evidence portal. Let them see the latest chapter in her unraveling. That same evening, something strange happened. My security system detected a data packet from an unknown phone connecting to my guest network. That shouldn't have been possible. I always had the password randomized and locked down with MAC filtering. But then I remembered. During her friendly cookie visit, Karen had scanned the QR code on my fridge when I offered her water. It was just a guest network. No sensitive data, but it meant her phone had stored the credentials. And when she walked past my house that day, it auto-connected. Just for a second. Long enough. That's when I activated the final trap. A passive network trigger that logs and archives any auto-connecting devices, complete with geolocation stamps and device metadata. Karen had just walked back into my net, entirely by accident, and left behind digital footprints even her pearls couldn't cover up. The icing on the cake? The passive network snare detected that she had tried running a spoofing app, one of those cheap fake GPS tools you can download when you're trying to trick a location-based service. Unfortunately for her, my system flagged it instantly and captured the unencrypted payload. It was clumsy. Amateur hour. But it was enough to prove intent. The logs were uploaded within the hour. Another ping. Another update to the case file. Another nail in the legal coffin she was building for herself, one tampered camera at a time. Karen wanted to scare me into submission. Instead, she'd walked herself into a digital minefield. And the best part? I hadn't done anything to her. I'd only protected what was mine, legally and quietly, while she kept adding fuel to the fire. And now the smoke was thick enough that even the agents across town could smell it. She wanted a war. What she got was surveillance-grade karma. And it wasn't even over yet. The story should have ended there. Any rational person would have seen the warnings, heard the knock from federal agents, received the cease and desist reality check, and retreated. But Karen was not a rational person. She was a walking cautionary tale with Wi-Fi access, an ego the size of her hydrangeas, and the self-awareness of a traffic cone. I figured she might simmer down, lay low, maybe even move away quietly. But no. Instead, she chose the most Karen option imaginable. She tried to turn the neighborhood against me. It started subtly. I'd catch snippets of conversation when I went for walk. A couple on the corner wouldn't wave like they used to. Another neighbor pulled their dog away a little too fast when I passed. Then came the whispers. One woman on the sidewalk muttered, "Spy house," under her breath as I passed her by. Another nodded in agreement like I was some villain hiding missile codes in my basement. Karen, it seemed, had gone full propaganda mode. Flyers were circulating again, different this time. Glossier paper, fewer typos, more fear-mongering buzzwords. Digital stalker, community threat, and my favorite, he's watching you eat dinner. To be clear, none of my cameras faced anyone else's property. Not one. Every angle was locked to my driveway, my porch, my backyard, and the side alley that led to the garage. But facts weren't Karen's weapon of choice. Her arsenal was made of paranoia, ignorance, and a large collection of printer ink. She even tried to start a petition to have me tech-barred from expanding any further surveillance, like she had jurisdiction over private property just because she shouted loud enough at the HOA meetings. Of course, she didn't tell people the full story. She didn't mention that she'd trespassed, that she'd tampered with my equipment, that she'd been caught on camera over a dozen times, had triggered a federal-level investigation, and had personally threatened to sue me with legal logic scraped from a reality show. But I didn't say a word. I let her run her mouth while I ran the logs. I updated my system to include public recording compliance notices, a small, neat sign near my front door that read, "This property is under 24/7 surveillance. For your safety and mine." It was enough to satisfy every local ordinance. But more than that, it was a mirror. It forced people to ask, why would someone need all this? And then, right on cue, came the final twist. It was a Thursday evening when the knock came. Not at my door. This time, it was 3 houses down at Karen's. I recognized the car before the agents even got out. Same unmarked sedan. Same calm precision. Agent Grayson and Agent Lou back again, only this time with backup. 2 more agents joined them as they approached Karen's house, one of them carrying a manila folder thicker than a Bible. I didn't even bother pretending to read my book this time. I just watched from the porch, sipping tea, letting the moment steep like a good revenge. The conversation wasn't quiet. It didn't need to be. Karen shouted. She flailed. She pointed again, at my house, at the sky, at her own mailbox like it had betrayed her. She ranted about oppression, abuse, illegal surveillance, mental anguish, digital warfare, every word a confession wrapped in denial. The agents didn't argue. They just let her dig the hole deeper. Then one of them handed her a paper and asked her to sign it. She refused, of course. But it didn't matter. The visit wasn't for her cooperation. It was a notice of investigation escalation. Karen's behavior had officially crossed the line from nuisance to obstruction. Her attempts to tamper with surveillance tech, interfere with digital systems, falsify neighborhood documents, and harass a protected system user, all of it was now part of a consolidated file. And the agents? They weren't just gathering anymore. They were warning. That same day, she received a notice from the local precinct. She was being cited for trespassing, harassment, and attempted property interference. Nothing flashy yet, but enough to stick. Enough to make it public record. Karen was now officially on the book, and everyone on the block knew it. The mood shifted almost immediately. Neighbors who had avoided me began waving again. A couple of them came over to quietly ask what really happened, and when I showed them just a few seconds of the footage, the ladder, the flashlight, the whispered threats, they were speechless. One guy down the street who'd signed her fake petition actually apologized and told me his Ring doorbell had caught her messing around with his motion lights weeks ago, but he hadn't thought anything of it. Turns out, Karen had a pattern. A long one. And then the internet found out. I hadn't planned to share the story online. But a friend convinced me to post a redacted version. No faces, no full names, just the facts, on the Entitled People subreddit. Within hours it blew up. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments. People couldn't believe how far she'd gone. The twist that the cameras auto-reported tampering to the FBI had readers howling. Federal Karen watch list became a running joke. Someone even made a meme of her diving into the bushes while a drone hovered overhead. I'll admit, I laughed harder than I should have. By the end of the week, Karen's campaign had crumbled. The neighbors stopped listening. The HOA distanced themselves, issuing a public statement saying they had no formal connection to Ms. Bell's activities. She stopped going outside. Her blinds stayed closed. Her garden wilted. And then, just like that, one morning she was gone. moving truck. Packed in silence. No goodbye. No notes. Just an empty house and a wilted hydrangea where her pride used to be. I stood in my driveway, watching the last of her furniture disappear into the back of a box truck. For a moment I thought about walking over, saying something, wishing her luck. But then I remembered everything, the cookies, the threats, the nonsense, the ladder in my flower bed. And instead, I turned, walked inside, and let the cameras do their job one last time. A week later, I replaced the decoy cam with a hummingbird feeder, set up new motion lights, and on my porch I installed one final touch. A small wooden sign that read, "This property is protected by AI, common sense, and a Karen deterrence system. Please proceed with all three." The war was over. The neighborhood was quiet. And my cameras? Still watching. But now they recorded something new. Peace.